Hello from Diplomatic Language Services, and welcome to our podcast, Language Matters. We make language accessible to everyday people by discussing features which may not exist in other languages. I'm your host, Molly Sampson. Welcome to this podcast episode of Language Matters. Today we're going to focus on Turkish for our 13th episode. I have with us today Zeynep, and she is a Turkish teacher here at DLS. Oh, and I totally forgot my Turkish greeting. How do I?
Merhaba.
Oh, merhaba.
Say,
Okay. But isn't it like nasılsınız?
Nasılsınız? How are you?
Okay. Nasılsınız, Zeynep?
Teşekkür ederim. İyiyim. Sen nasılsın?
And then we also have Jessica, and she is one of our project managers here, but lived in Turkey for 5 years and has studied the language. So,
Merhaba.
Merhaba. I think we usually start with the writing system. So we were talking about it before, similar to English characters, but can you talk about the differences a little bit?
Yeah. Well, Turkish, it uses the Latin alphabet. It used to use the Arabic writing system, but I think it was changed over in the 1920s.
Yeah, thanks to Atatürk after establishing
right.
the Republic. Yeah, he switched the alphabet too, and that helped a lot with the literacy, of course.
And speaking as a Turkish learner, the alphabet, having the Latin letters definitely makes it easier to understand. So you can look at Turkish and read it, even if you don't know it. But there are some different letters.
So it's purely phonetic. If you know the alphabet, you can pronounce
It's much
everything?
more phonetic than English. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. But it has some extra letters.
Has extra letters. That might be difficult for a learner, but it is actually otherwise really, like you said, it's totally phonetic. There are no silent letters with one silent G. It's called the silent G, so the yumuşak G. That's the only one which does really
It looks like a G?
It is G with a little thing on top.
Okay, like a little hat?
A little hat, yeah. And that, what it does really elongates the vowels, because normally Turkish vowels are always short vowels, and then that elongates the vowel. That's all it does. But otherwise, like you're saying, there's some letters that only Turkish alphabet has, and then we are missing some letters from English, like the Q and the X and
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
W, for example.
The ones we don't really need anyway. So which letters, as a learner, or I guess sounds, because the letters all produce sounds, for you or for your learners, what are some really difficult sounds in the Turkish language?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, definitely the yumuşak G was harder, not because it's hard to say, but because vowels are really difficult in Turkish. So, for example, even when I was saying just if I would go into a corner shop and ask for water, which is su alabilir miyim? Can I have water? Often the shopkeepers wouldn't understand what I was asking for.
They didn't understand your pronunciation of the word water.
Of the word water, which is su, su.
So let's hear Zeynep say it. Is it
So,
So I don't know if you can hear the difference. Like
it's a little
su
shorter.
And yeah. So the vowels definitely are what were by far the trickiest for me as a student, is trying to, especially the vowel length was really hard to master.
Because they're longer, or you have to decide if they're short or long?
You have to decide if they're short or long, and just kind of the quality of the sound was different sometimes, it seemed. And it could really cause misunderstanding to where someone would not understand you because you were mispronouncing a vowel.
Oh.
because we have all the vowels, for example, the U, we have a flat U, so-called, we have an umlaut U, and then flat O, and an umlaut O. So the umlaut O sound is an Ö sound, and for the most part, I would say my students have the most difficulty with sounding the Ö, and then the flat I, which is an Ö sound.
Can you say them back to back again?
Ö, Ö. And then making a differentiation between Ö and the Ö sound. And when I'm teaching, I always say Ö is the same sound as you're saying early or dirty. But the students, most of the students are visual learners. So when I say early, they visualize the way early is written in English, and then they cannot visualize that letter. So that's why the Ö sound is really hard. It only comes, I think, in English when you say like caution, shun, that Ö. Otherwise, it doesn't come up really. So that's also hard to pick.
Okay. So we're talking about pronunciation, but can you tell us a little bit about Turkish is obviously spoken in Turkey. Where else do you find it in the world and the surrounding region?
Well, Turkic nations speak Turkish. It's a little different, but it's the same language in the basis, but they might have different borrowed words from Russian, especially the Turkic countries.
Okay.
But all the Turkic nations like Turkmenistan, as you say in Turkish, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, they all speak a form of Turkish. And of course, Turkey speaks Turkish. And then we have to also remember all these Turkish people living in Europe.
Yes.
Many
There's a large
millions of
population
people
in
Germany, France, Netherlands, Austria. And there are the second, third, fourth generation people living there, but they still keep the language.
So why are there so many Turkish people in Europe?
Well, it started actually with Germany many years ago when Germans needed some extra workers to come and work, especially in the mines. And the Germans did not want to. And then they really literally invited Turks to come and work. And then that's what the first generation started going, already obtaining their visas and everything. But
and then they started to migrate through the European
bringing
Union.
the families and stuff. At some point, then Germany started not wanting them anymore. After even a period, they sent the Turks back, and then they were really hard hit by because the mines, especially the mine workers, the Germans did not want to work, so they called them back again. But nowadays, I mean, there are like generations and generations of Turks. They've just born there, and they have most of them, they have the nationality and they're citizens and stuff.
I see. So of the other languages like Uzbek and Turkmen and Azeri, how far apart are they? Can you mutually understand each other across languages?
I think Azeri is the closest, right? I used to always hear people say that.
Yeah. Azeri is the closest. I can communicate with an Azeri person, whereas Turkmen and Uzbek are, I think, the farthest from the Turkish. But if it is written, I can understand. I can read a Turkmen newspaper and understand.
I see.
If they talk, I have harder time understanding because they have a little different accent, the way they swallow certain words at the end, and it's just harder to pick. But written, I can understand.
I see. So before we were talking about the difference, maybe some of the words that are different in Azeri and
in Azeri, that's a good thing. Yeah, we have same words. The definitions are different, and sometimes it causes confusion because, for example, for the verb they use for the plane to land in Turkish, which is düşmek, in Turkish it means to fall. So that's why they say and once I was having a conversation and the person said they wanted to say the plane has landed. What I understood was the plane has crashed, and I was in panic, but these are some
So if you, over the announcement in the plane, they say, "Oh, we're crashing now."
Exactly. If a Turkish person is on the plane, it will be just totally
pure panic.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then we were talking before also about some interesting grammatical features, maybe what you found really difficult or what English speakers find really difficult about the language. What would you say?
Yeah, the grammar is definitely very different from English. Turkish is an agglutinative language, which means it uses suffixes to make meaning. So
suffixes for people that aren't language people, but putting letters at the end of or little particles or something at the end of words to make more meaning?
Yeah, so like an example of a suffix in English would be like ly to make something an adverb. So you have the word slow. If you add the suffix ly, it means slowly, and it creates a different word. So Turkish has a lot more of those than English. So, for example, if you want to say like, I can do something, in English it's a separate word, but in Turkish it's a suffix that goes at the end of the word. So if you want to say konuşmak means to speak. If you want to say to be able to speak, you have to say konuşabilmek. And so definitely the suffixes are different because it means the word order is really different. And that's a big challenge for a learner, I'd say.
So how's the word order different?
It's subject, object, verb.
Subject, object, verb.
Versus, subject, verb, object. That's one thing, definitely. And then, of course, we have these things when you're forming these so-called subordinates. For example, the woman in a red dress, the woman who's wearing a red dress. So then we have to put some so-called participles to the verb stem. And then the order also gets totally, again, different from the English. It's backwards, totally backwards.
Almost the opposite.
So if in English you want to say, I saw a woman wearing a red dress, that's the sentence in English. But in Turkish, the order is...
red dress wearing woman I saw.
Yes. So it's very different.
Right. So,
yeah.
And in those languages, I've heard, about how you have to wait so long. You have to listen for the entire sentence, where in English, a lot of times you get the verb and you can guess what the objects are going to be.
Yeah.
So interrupting people is much harder because you never get the full meaning until the end.
In English, you hear the subject and the verb. At least you know who's doing what, and then you have to look for. But in Turkish, the verb and most of the time the subject is at the end because if it's a pronoun, it's not going to be used. People omit it, so you have to wait to figure out who's doing what.
Yep.
So is that the kind of the most difficult thing you find?
The word order is different. Yeah, the suffixes are different. And then also, I think we were talking about earlier, Turkish has these really long words that you would take an entire sentence to say in English. So if you say, like, I shouldn't have done that, that's like 4 or 5 words in English. But in Turkish, it's just one word. Yeah. And I think Turkish holds the record for the longest word.
For the longest word, yes.
So what is the... Can you say it in Turkish?
I'll try to say it sometimes. It's a tongue twister. Let's say, Çekoslovakyalılaştıramadıklarımızdan mısınız?
It's all one word.
It's all one word.
And it means...
It means, are you one of those who we could not make it into Czechoslovakians?
I guess it's not used very often, but...
No, it's been just created, I guess, to show how long a Turkish word can get.
Yeah. So you were also talking about translations. Are translations then much shorter?
Translations are much shorter, yeah. I was talking about the Harry Potter books. The books normally are about 800, 900 pages long. And then once I just looking in a Harry Potter translation, and it's only like 500 pages long. And I first, even though I teach language, I speak Turkish, I thought maybe there are parts that are missing. It's so much shorter, but it's not. It's really the full translation.
Oh, maybe it's more efficient.
It is efficient. It's very compact. It's very efficient, yeah.
Do you nowadays have some borrowed words from English? Do you get a lot of, or from other languages in the area?
Yeah, well, Turkish has a lot of words that are borrowed from Arabic.
Okay.
And yeah, you can often tell by the way a word is spelled or something if it comes from Arabic. And then it has borrowed words from English too, I guess.
Less, some technological. Words maybe from English, but it has a lot of Arabic, Persian, and French, many French.
Oh, yes, lots of French. That was a big... So even you can say, like, merci is a Turkish word that means thank you.
I think in Persian you also say merci, right?
Yeah, so they also use that, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we've been talking about language differences, and some of those bleed into cultural differences. Are there any things that you think are, language-wise that are related to culture?
So one difference that Turkish has is they have a suffix to talk about the past, the mush suffix, and it means that you didn't see something yourself, but you heard about it. So in English, if you were to say, like, oh, I heard that, she's coming, or I heard that it's raining in another city, you have a separate suffix for that, just one suffix.
Yeah. So if someone tells you, for example, it's raining in New York today, you're talking to a friend, and the friend is in New York, but you're not. And then if you want to just report it to another friend saying, if you say in English, which you would say, it's raining in New York, in Turkish it sounds so wrong, because I would say, how do you know that? You're not in New York. You've been only told, so you have to use this particular conjugation tense to say, make it clear that that's what you've been told. But
I think that's a good feature, because you almost can't make things up then. You always have to modify it. So you say, Istanbul's a beautiful city. And then if I've never been there,
exactly.
I'm just...
Exactly. But mush is also used for skepticism.
Yes.
To qualify your
so
statement.
That's what he says, but kind of.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. And sometimes even like among foreigners who were kind of in the middle of learning Turkish, people would just, because they wanted to be able to express that sense of like uncertainty or like qualifying it. So they would just use mush in an English sentence. They were like, well, they said we'd leave on time, but mush. We'll see,
That's almost like inshallah.
Kind of, yeah. So it was like, and I think that kind of like shows how it really is something that is a very useful thing to have in a language. And even if people couldn't use it, they still wanted to be able to like communicate
that sentiment.
Yeah, it had something that they wanted to say. So I thought that was really interesting.
Of course, one more thing that different from English. Other languages have that, but English doesn't have. We have the formal U, informal U. So being formal is important. So that's not one U.
Yeah. So how quickly do you go into the formal versus?
Oh, from the beginning on. From the very beginning on. I teach the students actually always starting the formal U because you can never go wrong with using the formal U, but you can go wrong with the informal.
Oh, so how quickly? So if I
you
meet you, how quickly do you move from? No, not teaching wise.
Oh, okay.
In everyday conversation, how prevalent is the informal? If I go to a shop, I assume I use formal or.
That is interesting. That if you go to a shop, you are the customer, so you're fine saying it, you addressing the person with the informal you. But the shopkeeper have to be formal with you.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then if you meet a person, young people meeting each other for the first time, they straight go into the informal. If the person is older, definitely that shows the respect, informal you. Or if the person has a higher position than you at work, then it's definitely the formal you.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, since we're in culture, we like to end with either a proverb or an idiom or an interesting saying that you think kind of brings Turkish to life.
Do you have one? Or?
I don't know if it brings Turkish to life, but it's absolutely the funniest saying that I've ever heard in my life.
Okay.
And it's, how do you say, it's in Turkish, it's maydanoz olmaz.
Maydanoz olmaz.
Maydanoz olmaz.
That's a funny one.
Which literally translates as "don't be parsley," and but the meaning is "don't be nosy," because in Turkish cooking, parsley is in every dish. It's everywhere.
So don't be in everything.
Don't be trying to be in everything. Don't be like parsley, which is in everything. So if you want to say someone like "don't be nosy," you just say "don't be parsley."
Okay, now I know, Jessica, when we're talking, someone's doing that.
Yeah.
I'll just call them parsley.
Yeah. Stop being parsley.
And of course, you probably know hospitality is very important. Turks are very hospitable people. And then this saying is like Tanrı misafiri. Tanrı misafiri means like a guest sent by God. So everybody, even if you don't know someone and then they come knocking on your door, say, I'm sorry to bother you, whatever, they say, oh, please come in. You are Tanrı misafiri, sent by God. Come in.
Okay.
So that's a cultural
thing. Absolutely true.
Don't give us your address because we come looking for some Turkish food. So.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Language Matters. To our listeners, you can continue the conversation by tweeting us at DiplomaticLS, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Diplomatic Language Services.